Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Talking Point. My name is Sean Michael Small here on WESN, your content capital, the only station in the nation broadcasted in HD, where you can get that true quality visual television experience. Now, my co-host, Mr. Keaton Shah, he should be joining us shortly, as well as our usual Wednesday contributor, Karen Shashira. So don't worry, we have a packed show, but you know, it falls on me to start off the show this morning. The show must go on, as I literally always say in these situations. So, in fact, you know what, Director? Let's get straight into the daily review. Quite a lot of things has been in the news. Of course, the obvious thing is SCA exams. It is here once again. Every year, thousands of our primary school students, they have to undergo this trial. And of course, I think every year at around this time, and then at around the time results come out, we do question to what extent should this trial exist in this form. A lot of stakeholders were quoted by the media with regards to the upcoming SCA exams. 18,889 students. It's almost shocking to know just how many students have to go through this every year. And that's just standard 5. But one of the things that I found interesting is the fact that the Minister of Education, there were other messages, and to some extent I find a lot of the messages to the students, at least the Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, they seem kind of adult, maybe not too adult, maybe not too, you don't need to be too old or too mature to understand them, but to some extent, you know, it's difficult to remember what it was like being 11, 12, in case of one of my classmates, 10 when they did, well, for me it was common entrance. But one of the things that the Minister of Education had to say is, this is not the end, this is the start of your new journey into secondary school. And I understand that maybe some kids might actually be afraid or panicking because they got that notion in their heads. And I get that. Also, of course, there's that feeling of the end because you're going to be, for all intents and purposes, torn apart from the class that you have known for 7 years out of your 11 to 12-year life. This is the majority of your life and the only life you've known outside of your house. These are the people that's been around you, and if you're lucky, you'll go to school with 1 or 2 of them. But to have a general message to say this is not the end, and I don't know, maybe it was more for the parents, but then it made me uncomfortable to think that this sort of message was even necessary, because these are kids. It's something that technically, yes, it will determine the next phase of their life in a significant enough way that it's going to impact the rest of their life. Potentially. Likely. Not necessarily, but likely. To put that amount of pressure under kids that age, there's a part of me that has a big, big issue about it, that questions the ethics of the system. And it was like that when I was young. But I do think, and from what I understand, the Ministry of Education, before Dr. Nayan Gatsby-Dolly, and potentially under her watch as well, I'm not too sure, I haven't been updated since, but I found out before COVID that, well, the syllabus for primary school students has been regularly changed on an annual basis for years leading up to 2019, 2020. It caused the workload of one veteran, experienced primary school teacher who taught me to be so out of whack to what she used to do when I was there. And I get it. Yes, technically, you know, the world advances, etc., etc. But it should not be to the point where with extra help and extra work, more time and assistance, a whole other body to help her, she still could barely get through the syllabus by the end of the year, just for her year. And this is every year. And before they could get their feet underneath them, the syllabus changes again, and they have to figure out the changes and how they're going to teach them and retweak all the lessons plan. And it's a lot of extra work. So I get to some extent with regards to primary school teachers who might be frustrated or burnt out. You know, although at the end of the day, you're responsible for these little lives. But to what extent is that issue widespread? Because that was just one teacher who teaches 1 year. To what extent is that widespread throughout the entire primary school syllabus? To what extent is that making the SCA examinations now more difficult, more complicated, more complex? These are 11-year-olds that are doing an exam that's going to impact their future. Now, granted, if we didn't have a national exam, then there would probably be entrance exams for the schools that people want to go to, the prestige schools, whichever ones they are, right? The prestige schools are not sacrosanct. The top school in my day is no longer the top school. That's just how it is. Part of it is perception of the population. Part of the quality of the education of the top schools is really just the perception and the expectations placed on the students. So to what extent is it the be-all and end-all? And I do think that there are a lot of questions with the education system. Secondary has its own set of questions. But I do wonder about it. I don't know if we can get away from it, especially not in the short run. I don't want no fly-by-night slapdash system to come in and all of a sudden confuse the situation. It's also telling that teachers, principals, etc. are very much confident that now that they have been more stable and steady and consistent and just, you know, basically mainly and only in-person class time, these students should have better results than last year's students. Now, I don't think the president of the Teachers Union said so. I think it was the Principals Association. But it does put their negotiating position for me, well, it further clarifies or entrenches my opinion of some of their negotiated positions. Now, that's what I think about the union. I think the union was taking advantage of a bad situation because they didn't want to go back in the in-person classroom. They were more than happy to say, COVID, we don't want to go back, but pay for internet because we're using it for class. But I think it also points to perhaps bigger problems with our education system and our teaching profession and our industrial relations for public servants. It's a lot to say, but I'll just say, go back to the original point. I think there's an issue with our school syllabus, with our education system. Teachers notwithstanding, I do think the actual syllabus itself, not just the SCA examination, needs to be looked at and maybe stabilized and not necessarily having potentially somebody looking to leave their mark or reinvent the wheel or do some nonsense in the Ministry of Education. Because I think this issue, it's underneath the water. We see the tip of the iceberg with regards to education. But under the water, there's so much more. This feeds into crime. This feeds into lack of entrepreneurship. This feeds into a lack of productivity. This feeds into a population that potentially doesn't see a lot of prospects or hope here, so has to go away. How many successful people abroad could not make it here because we had problems? And it starts with the education system. Okay, next story. Education system. Well, to go from my doom and gloom, not necessarily the national doom and gloom, but to go to some potentially good news, and that is the government has more or less put out a statement that it's committed to repatriating TNT nationals in camps in Syria and Iraq. Now, I wasn't aware that we had TNT nationals in Iraq. It's a detention camps. I thought the ones in Syria were in refugee camps. So now I'm kind of curious as to what that means. Are there fighting age males or just males who would have taken the prerogative to go to the Middle East, to join ISIS, to be active? Do we have them in detention camps still alive? Are they being brought back in? That would be a whole other separate question that I'm going to be, I'll be honest, I'm uncertain about. However, I am certain about the fact that the kids, and to some extent their mothers, should be brought home. Now, of course, there are still concerns with regards to any potential national security issue. But what I don't understand is the statements being made that, look, this is going to take a long time to arrange, and you're talking about making arrangements with multiple jurisdictions, the governments, international bodies, etc., etc., etc. I get that. The problem is, from what I understand, I could be wrong, but Nafisa Muhammad is here to speak on this issue more than once. It's one of the first things we spoke about on Talking Point. There are international bodies and agencies and governments. There's this small, insignificant, happy-go-lucky, plucky. They do their best with what they have, but they don't have much. It's called the United States Military Central Command, who they are all weighed in and was said to have been willing to help with transportation and logistics. And CENTCOM commander is one of the top shots in the Middle East region because it's a foreign region to the States. It's not as though there's a governor and a senator and all of that there. So the top military commander who, in theory, I could only speak to those in the past, like Chuck Horner, they've embedded themselves, learned the culture, been part of the diplomacy in the region. I mean, if CENTCOM is saying we're willing to help. And to some extent, it depends on how far they're willing to help, because there are air bases all around the world. Potentially, that could basically we wouldn't necessarily have to go through many more jurisdictions, maybe just Turkey. So, I'm not entirely too sure why it seems as though they're hedging their bets. They're saying, well, we're committed to doing it, but we want to take our time. And my issue is there are literally kids that have, for all intents and purposes, grown up in that camp. That's the life they know. Now, just imagine. Kids, the only life they knew outside of their home was primary school, that class that they've journeyed together with for about 7 years. And it's taken from them because they have to go to secondary school. Not everybody's going to go to the same school. So, of course, the kids cry and they're sad and whatever. That is still a normal life. These kids have only known a refugee camp. And potentially, some of them might have actually been abused by people living in the camp. There might be malnutrition in the camp, lack of education in the camp. Definitely kids cannot be kids and go out and play in the river and kick ball and climb trees and have pets and no, that's not really how, I mean, you could have friends, you could huddle up together, in some corner of the camp. That's not really a way to live. It's one thing for adults to go through that. It's another thing for kids to go through that. But, I guess urgency is not always something that we see in government. And I get it. Governments around the world are not known for speed, but you can't necessarily rush education reform with kids in refugee camps in Syria. Maybe you could rush that, Not saying overlook things, but just don't look like you're taking any time. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody could call in and correct me, Minister of Foreign Affairs or any minister, Prime Minister, National Security Minister, Attorney General. You could call in. It'll be a hoot if you do. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, hopefully we will have both our Wednesday contributor as well as my co-host joining me. We have a bit to get into with regards to our economy. This is WSN's Talking Point HD. We'll be right back.
Trinidad, come and get blessed at the Good News Fest. Free groceries while stocks last and lots of giveaways like appliances and toys and much more with live music at each venue. 3 days only in South, March 30th at number 4 Recreation Ground, Palo Seco from 4 p.m. In Central, March 31st at Ancient Alley Promenade, Couva, 6 p.m. And in the East, April 1st, Macoya, Savannah, Macoya, 6 p.m. It's the Good News Fest, 3-day family event, March 30th to April 1st. Lots of giveaways after an encouraging word shared.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do in our country.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
But if we died with Christ, we have faith that we will also live with him. We know that Christ has been raised from the dead, and he will never die again. Death no longer has power over him. He died to sin once and for all with his death, but he lives for God with his life. Join WESN as we explore the death and resurrection of Christ with He is Risen, a perspective from bearing leaders within the Christian faith. He is Risen, starting March 27th, only on WESN, the content capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, joining me, we just have our good lady of Talking Point, Mrs. Karen Nurse-Shearer, former Minister of Finance, legal scholar, attorney at law, teacher to the many.
Teacher.
But Karen is actually not here to talk about necessarily a legal situation. A couple of things have come up, and we've spoken about them as they've come up, right? With regards to, well, the Dragon deal, we can't pay in cash, and then look, price of natural gas is going down, and a lot of these things. And the latest domino to fall has been that the Minister of Energy had to resign while other government officials were arrested for allegations of corruption. He resigned. Maduro is, well, taking a closer look at the energy sector, and it's just one more thing where now I think we've brought this up before, but there's one more thing now. There's an NDA between that we've signed with Venezuela, so we don't know exactly what's going on with the deal. Should we still have hope for this deal to go through to ensure we have a supply of natural gas?
Right. So that new development clearly has put another, I wouldn't say spoke in the wheel, but we certainly have to do another relook. Because as you know, initially I was very gung-ho. I thought it was a good thing. And I still think that if it were to go through, it would be very good because Venezuela has 4.3 trillion feet of natural gas. So I was reading the central bank reports, so just to give you an idea of the issue with Trinidad, we are seeing two things have happened. Well, one thing that has happened was, of course, the budget price, which will then let us know where we are going in terms of deficit or not. And, of course, that speaks to really the volatility of the energy prices, which is why when they are looking at core inflation, they do not include energy and food because of the volatility of those prices. Right. So when they make these projections, they're obviously making these projections based on what they anticipate will be the price. And I could never forget my own experience going to World Bank with Strauss-Kahn in the World Bank meeting in autumn. And I actually asked him, prices were $100 at the time in 2008. Yeah. And he said to me personally, yes, of course it's staying at $100. In January it was $23. So that's an aside. But when I looked at the central bank report, this is 2019, before COVID, it said there's a 30% decline in the flow, in inflows of currency due to weaker energy performance. The energy sector being the main source of supply to the market. Then I read what it is that the projected to be what Trinidad and Tobago would need to meet its production demands. Right. You know, in weather, because remember, natural gas is the main supply of electricity in this country, and it is a feedstock for the downstream industry, and definitely it is LNG, which is where the money is today. Yeah. And they said that in order for Trinidad to be able to meet its productivity levels that they got, you need to produce 4.3, I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe it's a year, 4.3 billion MMBTU of natural gas per year. And we are far removed from that. So I am starting this statement by saying that the issues that we have with natural gas and may continue to have with energy, because we have closed down the refinery, so we are importing all our oil. We have the production side of oil. But the issue we have with energy goes beyond price alone. It goes to the issue of we just don't have the production, which is why the natural gas, the Dragon Field deal was so important to us. Now, when the Minister of Finance gave the budget projections for this fiscal period, he had put oil at $92.50 and put gas at, I think, $6.50, I believe. And it's been trading at $2-something regularly. And I'm making that point because when the central bank had done its projections for what they expect the growth to be for 2023, they were looking at the prices of oil and gas more in the second and third quarter of 2022, which were pretty high. But then you've had a drastic drop. So whether now the next report, which is done biannually now, they're going to change their projection for growth and also a fiscal deficit. So this Dragonfield deal is very critical because it's not only, it's because of our production, we just don't have it, right? I know they put on, I just wanted to make sure that no one could say I didn't mention it. There were three, I don't know how they because I'm not the oil expert, but they brought on the Colibri, the Cassia compression, and the Zandoli de Novo, the Zandoli last year. But those simply cannot give us the kind of...
They're too small.
They're too small, and so that it's a question of production. So it brings us to what I said, the issue now of the deal, the Dragonfield deal. And I read the local newspapers, but also read other international reports. And of course, the stumbling blocks were already there. 2-year license, which I thought, well, maybe they could renew it because the world needs oil and gas. And that made me feel that it would happen because President Biden, who was the big environmentalist, appointed his whole environmentalist team. That's one of the first teams that he appointed when he became president. Gave his thing that he would not increase oil production. He gave permission for the Willow project to drill 160 oil wells in Alaska.
Practical necessity.
There you go. So it has put Venezuela in a much stronger position. If you see if you see Biden taking that political risk, you've got to understand the demand. And what they're saying now, as countries, especially China, recovering from their COVID lockdowns, that they take coal, they take oil, and so does India, right? And they are industrialized hubs. So I didn't think the 2-year license was that much of a problem. But the big problem, of course, was they're saying they can't pay in cash. But this is what the people want. This is what they need to buy, bring in imports, and to say in kind and not cash. That is a big stumbling block. But what has happened now is that what Maduro alleges, what Maduro is alleging, the corruption he is alleging, is that that a lot of oil, his Minister of Energy, who he fired, he said he was making deals with companies to selling the oil, but it was not being paid to PDVSA.
Yeah, there was an instance where oil on ships left and no money came in, and I think that's what started a couple of the PDVSA officials, 2 colonels, so I don't know why you put the military colonels in an oil company, that got them as part of some of the officials that were arrested back last week.
Right, and so what he is doing now, apparently there are many, many instances, according to the report, that of several instances of oil leaving Venezuela on ships, because one of the things the Minister of Energy was able to facilitate, he is of Syrian Lebanese ethnicity. And why that was important was because he was using his good relationship with Iran and Russia. This is what they said in the report, not what I'm saying. What he said in the report, to be able to take the lead. And it seems as though a lot of what has happened now is that now Maduro is putting a clamp down on all these deals. So that's one thing that's not good. He also said that a lot of officials he has dismissed and are charging them with corruption. But in relation to our NDA, it was signed with that same minister who has been
because I made the point
with corruption.
This is the guy that was the energy minister when these negotiations were going in. There's a chance that it's under his watch they want to do it, but if he's replaced, even if it's not for corruption, somebody new might say...
Oh, it's not for corruption. That's what he's been charged with.
Well, no, I don't think he's been charged.
Yeah, the allegations.
The allegations. No, what I'm saying is, even if you don't have that hanging over your head, once you make a change of leadership, the direction that they want to go could change. So the fact that, we have to be prepared that a different opinion is now coming into that seat and might not want to do the deal.
Yeah, and the unfortunate I'm not going to say assumption, but what is raised here is if the reason, according to the reports, is the reason why the Minister of Energy was removed was because of corrupt deals, which he was with other top officials, of selling oil and not PDVSA not benefiting from it, and now Maduro now finding out or whatever how widespread it is. Now Maduro has put a stop to all future NDAs, and he says he's going to look over every single one of them. Now, an NDA, as the newspapers and others have said, is not, you're entitled to confidentiality, but it is not the agreement. It is working towards the agreement, and of course, exactly, and the specific they have to work to is price. Now, a few years ago when Dr. Rowley told us that we were close to the Dragon deal, oil and gas natural gas was, everybody was going natural gas because it had the least carbon, etc., etc. Yeah. Now you're seeing natural gas trading regularly at 2-something per MMBTU. Yes, you may already have contracts lined up which will give you more, but Methanex has said they are not opening back up 2 of their I don't know if you call it factories or they're not opening it up because they're not prepared to have a 3-year natural gas production agreement. They want a minimum of 5 years. And then you have ammonia, which is one of the things that comes from the natural gas feedstock. Ammonia prices have dropped in half. So the bottom line to all that I have just said to you is that, and another point which I found very noteworthy, that when the January 2023 report from Central Bank, they said in the non-energy sector, growth had begun up from 10.5, growing up by 10.5% year on year from the last year. So you have to know, things are bad, but that's a good thing. But on the energy side, negative 2.5. How could it be negative 2.5? It's 2 things. 2 things. We just aren't producing or don't have access to the natural gas. We don't have, the price is not there, and even what we're making from Heritage, it's not $90 to $50, $72 on average now.
So, as you say that, I agree with you. It would be nice to get more information. We're left to speculate once again, but it's not unreasonable, because again, when you have an energy scandal, why are we going to expect everything to be smooth sailing unless Maduro comes out and says it? If Maduro came out and said, well, the Dragon deal is still moving ahead, no disruptions, fine. Because that's where all of the confusion is happening. But for the most part, and I said this at the start, and we all assumed, well, okay, obviously talks were hard with Venezuela, but it doesn't seem as though he is quite on board based on how he's spoken about the Dragon deal. So now we're kind of left in the dark. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Minister of Energy, to some extent, was kind of taken by surprise by all of this and now has to try to figure out what is the best way. And there's no manual with regards to how do I try to salvage a situation like this from our end. So if we are able to do it, kudos to the government if they could pull this off, even if it seems simple, from the outside looking in. But here's another thing to consider as well. Not only are you concerned with production falling off, we had a caller call in that made a statement, and we can't necessarily verify if it's true, but given the state of other parts of the oil and gas sector in the country, there might be some truth to this. Plants in Point Lisa, some of the older plants, etc., they might be getting old now. The cost to refurbish them and renovate them might be the cost to get a new plant, but they might no longer meet these international standards of what is in 2023. So just like how the refinery is old, some of our existing natural gas industry is getting there in age and apparently not maintained, which is something that we hear about things in Trinidad all the time. Maintenance is not being done. The export infrastructure to load ships.
So let me tell you something as you make that
Quick,
point.
as we have to make a
Okay,
break.
quickly. What they've said is that Maduro is focusing on oil, and Iran, they've come to a deal with Iran for them to refurbish 9 of their oil refineries which have fallen into decay.
In Venezuela.
In Venezuela.
Well.
And that is what is the last thing. They came to some agreement with them. So, and Atlantic LNG, you know, sent home a lot of people.
Yep.
There we
Yep,
go.
and you're not going to get that back. Folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll delve further into the economy because some of what Karen said touched on, well, some of the implications on the wider development of the country. It's a conversation Keith and I started yesterday. We'll continue it here today. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Talking Points on your content capital, WESN.
Yeah, that's
Trinidad, come and get blessed at the Good News Fest. Free groceries, white stock slabs, and lots of giveaways like appliances and toys, and much more with live music at each venue. 3 days only. In South, March 30th at number 4 Recreation Ground, Palo Seco from 4 p.m. In Central, March 31st at Ancient Alley Promenade, Couva, 6 p.m. And in the East, April 1st, Macoya, Savannah, Macoya, 6 p.m. It's the Good News Fest, 3-day family event, March 30th to April 1st. Lots of giveaways after an encouraging word shared.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at Southern Main Road, McBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
Mental health can explain the behavior of bullies, but also the impact of those who are bullied.
And you have those individuals who may have, some children have what you call conduct disorders. And a conduct disorder, some of them will like to light fires, kill pets, and all these things. Now, those children could go on into adulthood and be somebody with a personality disorder, is what we call a psychopath or antisocial personality disorder.
Do they pick on or target a specific personality, their victim, or is it across the board?
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Surprise! Welcome back to Talking Board here on WESN Content Capital. I'm glad to be joining the conversation now, as my co-host mentioned, a topic of which we started yesterday, and we'll continue to hear the voice of Karen, her thoughts on this. Devaluation, once more, devaluing the TT dollar, as you know, pegged to the US dollar. That's been floated once more. Not our currency, I'm talking about the actual question and the topic. The Minister of Finance actually sought to answer some questions. And there are pros and cons to devaluation, but once more, the Minister of Finance has reaffirmed his position as to we are not going to and we are not planning to devalue the Trinidad dollar anytime soon.
Well, we just had a conversation where we're looking at the energy sector. That's where we earn the foreign exchange to keep, you know, the dollar at the rate that it is for all intents and purposes. So now, is it just that slowly but surely we're going to eventually have to reach this point where we're going to have to seriously consider this and maybe devalue it just a little bit?
Well, I mean, we do have what they call the managed float of the dollar, which is something that many people, including, I think on both sides, felt that Trinidad had done the right thing in 1993 before it became more popular. Others, like Jamaica and Ghana, didn't do that, and they saw their money just go right down into free fall. And what the managed float does is that the central bank injects funds into the foreign exchange to keep it at a certain level, so it doesn't fall below a certain level. So that is one of the strategies that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has used to sort of keep the currency at a certain level. And what are the downsides? Yes, there are downsides, but unfortunately, which was sort of ironic and amusing to me, is many of the very reasons why you wouldn't want to devalue are a result of failing to diversify the economy and earn foreign exchange outside of oil and gas. Because we're seeing, where it is the discussion we just had, we're seeing things are not looking that positive. We hope things go through with Dragonfield, but at this point in time, that's supposed to be our savior. All the other Calibria, all of them not going to save us.
That's a very good point that you've raised, because Sean and I briefly touched on that yesterday. There are pros and there are cons to everything. I think the biggest con, if we ever were to devalue our currency, was our failure to diversify. You see, the thing is,
food security specifically.
In particular, because the thing is, exports actually become less competitive. well, actually more competitive on the market.
Our exports.
Our imports, though, because of the value, become more expensive. So the consumer down here, their consumer purchasing power actually weakens. So they would turn more to local products rather than the more imported products, which we don't have the markets as such now. I could understand completely why it is that we would want to stay away from devaluing, mostly because of our failure to actually fix things within the economy, the local economy, that is.
And that is so true, because when I looked at the sale to authorized dealers for 2020, said, I was just looking, getting the data. This is from Central Bank. It fell by 24%, but they're saying the bulk of foreign exchange goes to the credit card, 31%. Retail and distribution, 26%, which has to be food, has to be there, because the Central Bank governor already said that 80% of our food is imported, and the bill at the time, when he said it a year ago or so, was $5 billion, right? And surprisingly, the energy is 9.7, manufacturing is 9.3. But the point that you are making, and this was also interesting, which probably really speaks to why the argument may be used. They said that in the report in 2021, our price competitiveness, which is why you devalue. Devaluation is to make your exports more competitive. That is why countries devalue, because devaluation means your money is worth less, so that obviously if you were paying $10 TT before devaluation, since you devalue, that $10 really become more like $12. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. And most countries go the way of devaluation because to make their exports, so you have to have enough exports. What is our exports? And this is what this report said. It said that in 2021, in 2020, our price competitiveness was lowered by 1%, but increased, this is the reason, it increased in 2021 in our favor by 3.7%, due to the lower domestic inflation and appreciation in exchange rate in Trinidad and Tobago's major trading partners, not us, because their money appreciated in value, because their inflation lowered, it made us more price competitive. But even with that, as I know you all would have said it already, and all the economists say that, is that even in manufacturing, so much, what do the corn, the red beans, the black beans, I don't know where in Trinidad they're growing it. Maybe I have missed the place. But there's some places growing and I don't know. What I do know is they can it. And I do know that the canning material comes from abroad. So I want to know, when they sell a tin of corn or a tin of red beans or a tin of black beans, how much of that input is money that we in Trinidad and Tobago have created.
I think I can't emphasize enough again back to the lack of manufacturing and food security.
Real manufacturing.
Right, real manufacturing, where most of the stuff comes from here, so we don't have to import the inputs. Because what happens is, if we just devalue now, we'll probably just have a new balance point where, we'll also get inflation and we'll look more like Japan, where instead of $450, it'll be $450 for an item.
And you mentioned real manufacturing. Something just popped up in my mind yesterday. See that proudly TNT sticker? I wonder what are the requirements to get that.
So if we just devalue, we'll just rebalance, and if numbers will get higher, but we won't actually be better off. We need to have, and food security is a regional issue now. It's not just a national issue, but we're not taking it. We're not taking it seriously, despite what the minister says.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, an additional problem with that, it is a regional issue, but other countries, including Jamaica, Barbados, you know what their growth was last year? 9.4% from -0. All of them show significant growth. You know why? Because they have tourism. They have the financial sector that they have going. And now in Jamaica, they've reinstated aluminum. I never pronounce it correctly.
And just bear in mind, Barbados is currently under an IMF program. Just bear that in mind as well. But Karen, I wondered, how does devaluing our currency affect our debt repayments? Because if currently, in order to maintain our exchange rates or the value of our currency, the central bank has to pump in foreign exchange into our reserves. Devaluing our currency would allow for our exports to be more competitive on the market, which hopefully would equate to greater income. Does that affect our debt repayment to the extent that it's easier?
What do you mean by exports?
It's a good point. It's a good point.
No, what is our exports?
It's a very good point. Yes.
Yeah,
you're
because
right.
Technically, the oil and gas sector
But Atlantic
will
LNG
earn.
sent home people.
I know.
Methanex said they are not reopening two of their their factories or whatever, however they call, because they want a 5-year deal.
Yeah.
Ammonia prices have dropped by a half, and the save of what was the Save Trinidad, which was the Dragon Field, it looked like it up in the air for more than just corruption thing, because oil.
But our foreign debt, though, right? Our foreign debt would potentially be harder to repay because now it will cost more to pay it off. They'll want foreign currency that we will have to now go with the high exchange rate if we devalue.
No, I would tell you generally, Trinidad and Tobago has hardly taken on foreign debt, and that has been deliberate. And in fact, the only reason they take on, at least in my memory, and it continued, was because the only reason they took on some, and it was very low, was because they wanted to make sure that the Standard & Poor's and the Moody's and the people and IMF and all of that do the rating of your country could show that when you took on the debt, you paid it back.
Right.
But we have our banks and our insurance companies are highly liquid. So Trinidad and Tobago, and in fact, the IMF said that the debt has gone down to about 70%. But they have also said that they expect a growth of 3%, but last year they said expected a growth of 5%, and it was 2.5. And the reason why? The volatility of oil and gas, because they base everything, they have to be basing, including our central bank governor, on prices and price and production of the energy sector. And it just is not there, and I don't know if it will recover. And I want to say one thing. I think he said, I went and listened to the
press conference.
Yeah, I listened to it. I listened more to the question, I did, because he said that he used fear-mongering. That was one of his strategies, political strategies. Oh, you want Trinidad and Tobago to reach like what happened to Jamaica, because it is true that the old IMF, when they came in and they did this to Jamaica, they put such rigid requirements, fire this one, take away this, take away that they caused such chaos in Jamaica and civil unrest that the very foreign investment they want to attract, they did not. If you read the IMF now, they said they're taking a softer approach, and they're also recognizing that the terms that they are applying to Caribbean countries or less developed countries are much harsher than they apply to the so-called developed countries, and examples were given. So in the case of Jamaica, he is wrong. The IMF went in there, but they went in there because Jamaica asked them under enough is enough, and they got the unions, the private sector, the opposition, the government, every man jumped on board, and they gave them what they call an extended fund facility in 2013, and it helped them tremendously to bring down their debt, still high, to also continue to grow the economy, which it is still growing. And so having the IMF has learned its lesson, and it doesn't come in there with a heavy hand anymore. It has different arrangements. This one's an extended fund facility. Another one is a standby arrangement, and they are far more aware of the socio-economic implications of taking this harsh approach to countries like ours.
Just to agree what you're saying, I just say you can't take the praise from the IMF and then,
and it's of the IMF of today,
and then say, well, why am I going to take their recommendations for? But you want to take the praise? Just say.
The thing is,
fear-mongering.
This notion, and I said the stigma that has been created that the IMF is the big bad wolf. If ever you get the opportunity, go look up the rapid financing, the rapid credit facility and the rapid financing instrument.
Yes, we've spoken about this.
Those two things in particular, go look it up at the IMF. And again,
it's a new IMF.
It is.
It's
not the
2008.
I was going to say, it's not the IMF of the 1990s.
No, it's not the IMF of the 2008 when the global financial crisis occurred. That's what happened.
We have to break for news. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines. You could disagree with us all you want. I'm sure there are a few of you out there, but News on the Hour is next.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Prime Minister pleads with churches to play active societal role. 4 more succumbed to COVID-19. Gardener charged for Tortuga murder. And internationally, WHO experts revise COVID-19 vaccine advice. Now for the details. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has made a clarion call for churches to play an active role in the influence of society.
Many young people today are suffering from the existence of the vacuum, where what religion was doing in engendering in young people an understanding that there is good and that there is evil, that there is truth and there is falsehood, that there is ambition and there is lack of ambition, and that there is respect and disrespect, and encourage them to differentiate between both sides and to take a side. In the absence of that, the behavior in the national community is deteriorating.
Now for a COVID update. 4 more persons have succumbed to the COVID-19 virus. According to the Ministry of Health's dashboard, 272 new cases were also recorded in the last 7 days. The total death toll is now 4,372. The rolling 7-day average of deaths remain at 1, while for active cases, the figure is 39. There are currently 58 persons hospitalized with the virus at this time. Moving on now, 29-year-old Alex Lewis, a gardener, is expected to appear before the Couva Magistrate Court to answer to a charge of the murder of Ganesh Diopasad. The charges were laid against Lewis on Monday. According to reports on March 14th, Diopasad was shot and killed at his Tortuga home. The suspect was arrested and the charges were later proffered by PC Bernard of HBI Region 3. In international developments now, the World Health Organization's vaccine experts have revised their global COVID-19 vaccination recommendations, and healthy kids and teenagers considered low priority may not need to get a shot. The updated roadmap is designed to prioritize COVID-19 vaccines for those at greatest risk of death and severe disease, according to the World Health Organization's Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization. It is being issued to reflect the Omicron stage of the pandemic and because of countries' high population immunity levels due to vaccines and infection, the group announced following a recent meeting. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Trinidad, come and get blessed at the Good News Fest. Free groceries, white stocks last, and lots of giveaways like appliances and toys and much more with live music at each venue. 3 days only in South, March 30th at number 4 Recreation Ground, Palo Seco from 4 p.m. In Central, March 31st at Ancient Alley Promenade, Couva, 6 p.m. And in the East, April 1st, Macoya, Savannah, Macoya, 6 p.m. It's the Good News Fest, 3-day family event, March 30th to April 1st. Lots of giveaways after an encouraging word shared.
You ever made your grocery list with all the essential items and you plan your budget, and when you get to the grocery, you say to yourself, it should be cheaper. And it ends up just making you cry at the end. Yeah, that's a discussion we were just having off air very briefly. In a different context.
In a different context? Something like that, but different subject matter?
Totally.
Okay.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Miss Denise Martin for news on the hour. I think it's only appropriate that we open up the phone lines now. Oh no, wait, it is that time to open up the phone lines now. So call in and join us on Talking Point this morning. The number's on your screen. Karen Yesishar is with us in studio. It was so nice, she decided to do it twice. She might be back next week, actually.
that joke was so original, Keaton. I've never heard that before in my life.
Who says it was a joke?
Oh.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, join the conversation. Please don't call in at the very final minutes. And when you do call in, be mindful of the time of your contribution as well as the volume on your television. And we don't really like to hear ourselves that much. We hear that enough on a daily basis.
Of course, feel free. You don't have to talk about what we've spoken about. You could bring up something else. There's only so much time in the first hour to speak about issues. We have our first caller from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Morning, gentlemen. Morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to touch on the exchange rate situation and the proposed evaluation. While I agree that within the economy you have people, because of the scarcity of foreign exchange, there's a black market that is actually trading much higher than what the official exchange rate is. I tend to agree with the minister for not devaluing based on this issue. If you look at Europe and England, over the last few years, what they have done is they have some quantitative easing issues that where they have put money into the economy, right? Mm-hmm. To try and protect the dollar. However, in the United States, since 2008, barring 3 years until now, they have injected money to prop up that U.S. dollar every year, barring 3 years, which I think is 2016, 17, 18, somewhere there. And every time they have an issue, they put a set of money into the economy. And remember, what they're doing is they are artificially propping up that U.S. dollar, giving a disadvantage to other currencies. Mm-hmm. So the real value of the U.S. dollar is not what it is. And hence the reason for that, I agree with the minister for not letting, not devaluing. However, one other thing, with respect to what Karen said about that 31% of foreign exchange going to credit cards, is that what you said, Karen?
Yes, I did.
No, that is, I have an issue with the banks in Trinidad and Tobago and that, the commercial banks. Because what happens is, the commercial banks are putting that money into credit cards because this is a fact that the credit card companies give the banks a share of the profits that they make on those credit card sales. That is why there's a scarcity.
Hello?
Yeah, it sounded like...
All right, it's very interesting, the last point that you were raising there, because at one point, the limit on a few people told me this, the limit on their credit card just went up. They didn't know how, they were not notified. It's just actually when they received their credit card statement, they realized, hold on, my limit just went up. What's happening here? Yeah. But anyway, Karen, you wanted to respond.
Very quickly to say that I'm not against the reasons that the minister gave for not devaluing. What I'm saying is, why we can't devalue is because we have not provided other avenues of earning foreign exchange so that our exports can be more attractive and we are more food secure and we don't have to import as much. And that is my major point, that we have not done the work. And in regards to what you talked about, what America is doing, in fact, with the Fed is actually increasing the interest rate because they don't want that amount of liquidity in the system, and that is causing capital flight in Trinidad because our repo rate is 3.50 and has remained so for the last few years, whereas in America it's 4.75. So people who have US are not leaving the US in Trinidad, they're sending it abroad, so you're getting more and more capital flight with the black market. And finally, with regard to the US dollar propping up, well, that's what countries will do, but you are now seeing that China is becoming a big player because they have gotten into an arrangement with Russia for them to accept to pay. For Russia will accept payment for their oil and natural gas in yuan, or however you pronounce it.
What do
you pronounce it?
Yuan.
Thank you. The point being that the US is no longer dominant in oil. That's all I wanted to say.
With regards to the US maintaining their exchange rate, part of it too is, remember, it was used as one of the main trade currencies for the world, and a lot of people actually have a large amount of foreign exchange in the US. Right? So the US, of course, there's benefits to maintaining that situation, but in order to have that situation, your currency has to be stable. You can't allow it to just dip and then all of a sudden my foreign exchange reserves devalues because of how you're managing your money. So to some extent, yes,
that's a good point.
it is the United States is doing something that other nations can't do. But the flip side is, do we want our Heritage and Stabilization Fund to drop in purchasing power by 10 to 30% because the US decides, let's just devalue? No, we don't. What currency do we want to put our HSF in, if not US dollars? Do we want to take the plunge and go with the BRICS nations and say we'll go with the won or the ruble or whatever? I don't think so, because at the very least, the United States has proven they have a track record of being a stable, trusted currency that can be used around the world.
Well, okay. First of all, let's understand that when we're not making an argument for devaluation, we're examining the pros and cons. Right? That's all we're doing. We're simply examining the pros and the cons. But you just said the US has been trusted in terms of the stability of their dollar. And I think the biggest thing that we have to understand is that even though the US, on paper, is always in debt, every single currency, or most currencies around the world, the exchange rate is pegged to the US dollar. So bear that in mind as well, right? And that is one of the powers of the US and the US dollar. That is why exchange rates around the world are so interesting to examine.
So just quick, we have a call coming in, but caller, how you explained it is not exactly how the minister explained it. We have a call coming in from Shogunas. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen and lady.
Morning.
I hear Karen say something that I always suspected, and that is the action of the U.S. is causing capital flight from Trinidad. But the Minister of Finance said the opposite. And I don't understand where he got his from. He said there is no evidence of capital flight. And I think it is so obvious that capital flight is taking place. But go back, I see you forget brief Karen on my question, on two questions that I gave you here before.
Go on, Professor.
And this is where she said that the difference between the categories for the NIS was negligible. But then they come up with a system with no difference between it, and I don't understand the logic of that.
Okay.
And the second one was she claimed that they had advice in it. But why is this advice being hidden? And all the people who criticize it, like the IMF who I mentioned, that is available to the public. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Okay, but I'll answer the first question first, because I was in government when the actual report had been given for what should be done increasing the NIS contributions. And it was a political decision, I think. You have to understand that there are a lot of poor people in Trinidad and Tobago, and increasing the NIS contributions, especially since it didn't include the self-employed and a number of people were out of the system, that had a lot to do. And that is not only that government, it has been a continuous problem in Trinidad. The reports are prepared and the advice is not taken. Okay? And with regard to, well, you said the capital flight point, and what was this other point?
I can't remember because it was also an
NIS. But, you know, but so that
I think it was the advice as it relates to...
Yes, and that was one of the points I can recall, that when the actuaries worked it out and they worked out the different categories, it seems as though those who actually worked at a higher rate than others, at the end of the day, the differential was not that much. But I only remember that based on the experts coming in to us and giving their advice going forward.
We have a caller on the line with us from St. James. Good morning, caller.
Oh, hi, good morning, lady and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, and I'm just calling to ask Ms. Karen a question, and well, to remind people of something that when past government was in power, the NIS account used to be with the I can't remember the name of the ministry that it was in. And then they moved the account from that ministry, is it social welfare or whatever? They moved the account from social welfare to the Ministry of Finance. All right? And I think it was the UNC government did that. However, I know for a fact that they use a lot of NIS money to pay outstanding debts in other areas, not in putting it to people pension and all of that. So, Ms. Karen, you will guide me. I don't know if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're not. You're not
right.
You're not entirely wrong. But what I will say is that it will take so much to say it. But when the NIS was first started, the amount that the NIS had compared to how much it was having to pay out at the time, they developed a huge amount of surplus. And if you look at the Act, it allows them to use the surplus to invest it, and also mostly in social programs. So they don't say that, so that if the NIS blends money in order to finance the building of a school, it is allowed under the NIS arrangement. They can do that, and that is allowed under the Act. So that has not gone outside of it. I don't know where else the loans are being given. And when I came into office, the NIS was under the Ministry of Finance. So I don't recall it.
He said it. I assume it would have been under the regime before yours.
Yeah, but the real problem is, and the actuaries have said that in all their reports, is that you have an aging population living longer than they did previously, like say 20 years ago, because of health advances and so on. Mm-hmm. And you have a younger population who are not having 4 and 5 children and who may be self-employed, so therefore they do not contribute to NIS. And I'm sorry to say we have a lot of unregistered Venezuelans in this country who are living in our country and not contributing to NIS. And it's not 1,000, it's thousands of them. So maybe we need to look at doing what Barbados did. Barbados included the self-employed. It wasn't every self-employed they got on the list, but they got enough of them. And they put the self-employed, like the hairdressers and barbers and tailors and so on. And so they had to start contributing to the NIS, and that's something we need to do. And they raised the age for NIS, I think, to 67. And I think the Barbadians accepted that.
Well, Macron is wishing that the French people will be even half as accommodating, because 64 is a hurdle that they don't want to cross.
Interestingly,
they're the French Revolution country, don't you understand? Those people, they're the Gilets jaunes. It's in their DNA. Don't you know the jaune gilet, how much they protested for over 2 years with their yellow jackets? My God.
That's a bit of history for you.
That's only the other day.
We have not the yellow jacket movement.
If they do not have a revolution, or they do not have a up thing and marching, that's not France.
We have French cultural revolutions. Why don't we have a little bit of that protest culture?
But you go and get yourself in trouble and say that you inciting people.
Peaceful protests.
Yeah.
Peaceful
protests. There we are. So, but the French are known for that. Right?
You don't comment.
Wait, before you go to them, don't you remember when they turned on the foreigners who they brought in after World War II to rebuild France, the Marshall Plan and all that, to rebuild their country and put them out in their different, I can't remember how they call it, in different areas they call, but it's a word they use, right? Built up all these horrible monstrosities for them to live in. And when they felt they didn't need these immigrants, who were no longer immigrants because they live in it 2 and 3 generations, big thing, they had big, not civil war, but I mean, they had uprising. Yeah. They are known for that, they and the Europeans. We are not.
We are not.
Thankfully.
Well, I'll say this though. Now you did point out that the reports, the experts were saying, well, we have less children, less birth rate. Could you imagine what a TNT would be like if we had like 3 or 4 more kids per generation for the last 20 years? I don't know if our infrastructure will be able to handle such an increase in population.
Well, we do. You have to understand that what's taking place.
We do have what?
I think what's taking place now, and nobody likes to speak about it, is that the number of children per household in TNT, you have you have this gap. You have young couples now who actually are focusing more on careers, right? But then many a times they're moving out of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, because they don't have careers here.
Right.
That is true.
Then there is the second aspect where there are about 4 and 5 kids per household. And this is why I say people don't like to talk about
But
it.
we're not getting that as much anymore.
And we're not getting the contribution. No, interestingly enough, I'm
you got that from the CSO because the CSO figures showing the population demographics and Trinidad.
We drop it.
I wouldn't say we drop it because I thought it had. Because 1.4, but it's more or less stays stable and it's not growing.
I'll be very honest with you.
Which means we need more than
it's
2
not,
kids per household, technically.
It's not from CSO figures. It's just based off of observation. And
oh my God, have mercy!
I am just simply putting forward a thought or an observation that I've made. And yes, there are the CSO figures. Mine actually do not align with the CSO figures. But that's fine. Because there are observations that you make out there in the streets. And sometimes you wonder what is actually being said. If it's actually equal to reality.
That's true.
But
that's true.
But even with
and it's
that,
done every 10 years anyhow.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think we do have a problem where you have, even though Karen mentioned, we have thousands of Venezuelans who are working in TNT but not contributing to the system. On the flip side, we have thousands of Trinbagonians who are either not working and are receiving grants from social and family services. And then there's the other ones who are working and not contributing to the system as well. And there are actually many of those with kids who will not be able to contribute to the system.
To be fair to you, if our population is being maintained, that means that on average, every couple will have two point something children, because it has to be just a little more than 2, not necessarily 3. So statistically, yes, a couple can't actually have 2.5 kids, but it will be. That is to say that for every however many couples, 1 will have 3.
Why not? Have you not heard of 2.5 men?
No, that's not how it works, Keaton.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, Sean.
Some people take things seriously.
Call on the line
when they watch the show.
From St. James. Good
Just
morning, caller.
Yeah, morning, Karen. I call back to ask one quick thing. Is there accountability when they use the money for investment? Is there accountability to show that they return the capital money back to the NIS account? Is there? And I'm sure they use money in other areas and there's no accountability
Caller,
of that, and they did not return the money. So what about those investments
I wasn't defending it,
No, it's not.
Yeah, I know.
Accountability show.
I was just going to ask.
I think you are on the same page here. Hold on, caller.
I was just going to ask you a question, which I shouldn't do. You shouldn't answer a question with a question, but is there any accountability at all anywhere?
So exactly, that is exactly what I thought.
That is true.
If we think that there's a lack of accountability in public service and in government, political party notwithstanding, whichever one, right? If we think
this
that,
one in particular, I have to say.
right? Why would we think that one area might just magically have accountability? It's not. It's just not, right?
Maybe we could hope for accountability.
And I just want to say, unless you have a call, labor force participation rate has gone down from 55% to 52%. And when you say labor force participation rate, you're looking at how many people are either employed or looking for a job. No, and it doesn't include disabled, it doesn't include students, it doesn't include an retired person. Maybe the reason people are not looking for jobs because one, either they're overqualified, they got a degree and they can't get a job, or there's not a living wage because by the time they pay for food, they have to pay for a helper for the 2.5 children and a nurse, whatever it's and also the gas transportation, what they're getting and they might as well stay home. So what we need to find out is why is our labor participation rate so low? America is about 60-something%. Now, the labor force participation went from 55 to 52% recently. That's CSO figures. But when they tell you the employment rate is 5.4%, it's 5.4% of the 52%, It's not 5% of the 100,
Yeah.
Right? And of that 5.4% of the 52%, the definition of unemployed is of employed or unemployed. Unemployed is persons who do not have a job or who are actively looking for a job within a particular period. So they are including people who are actively looking for a job and cannot find a job.
People who could work and people who
and
could
so
contribute
what the
can't,
question they should really ask before we start condemning and talking about, because this immigrant problem is a problem in Europe, all over they have that problem, right? What the question needs to ask, what is wrong in our system that we are not providing opportunities for young people to become entrepreneurs, so they have options rather than to become wards of the state? And that is the question to ask. Why are people not participating in the economy? Don't make it out that, oh, Trini is lazy. Any immigrant come to leave their country and come to your country, they came there to do better, not to come and make it worse. They came there to do better. So that is the mindset of an immigrant.
Based on what you're saying, I have a question, and actually on Friday, maybe you, the viewers, can answer this for me. If you're watching this morning on Friday, you could probably answer. Why is it that I, as a young Trinidadian or young Trinbagonian, why should I stay here?
Stay where? In
Trinidad and Tobago. Make an argument for me. Why should I stay here?
I know you want to say, well, don't just say that people are lazy, but
that is not
I have been told, right? Here's a bit of an anecdote. And for a government job where you don't have much work to do, they hired a set of people, and almost the entire tranche of people that was hired left the job. Even with a job where you have to barely, because there's a government work, they can't retain people. It's not a hard government job. It's not a physical.
It's too simplistic.
Right?
This thing, you know what it is? It's to justify hiring Venezuelans for less than the minimum wage.
Well, there is that.
And paying no NIS in this country.
No, but I will say this.
Unemployment.
When things like CPEP and URP exploded, and too many people went for those type of government jobs, which they are now not satisfied. It is not satisfactory enough now for parts of the labor market. It caused people to take the labor market for granted. They didn't have to listen to their boss that wanted them to put in 8 hours a week. They could just say to hell with you.
I want to tell you something before I go, since you'll only have me on today. Just to say, I was watching Faris on CNN, and he was saying, irony of all ironies, after England left the European Union and got Brexit, he has said 504,000 British nationals have left England because probably a lot of educated persons to work in maybe in Europe, in the international, in the financial or insurance business. And guess what has happened to them? 504,000 people have left. And you know, one of the main reasons they said that they went out was because too many Eastern Europeans were coming in the country. But guess what? 500,000 left. 500,000 left. But guess how many people have come in to help in skilled work in construction, etc.? 504. And guess where they come from? Mainly South Africa and Zimbabwe.
And guess what? The United Kingdom right now has over 1 million vacancies. They are looking for people to work. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm constantly hearing that it's very difficult now to spot an Anglo-Saxon in London, probably the most cosmopolitan nation in the world. But that's where we have to wrap it up. But just bear in mind, tomorrow is a spiritual Baptist, or spiritual Shouter Baptist Liberation Day. And it actually celebrates the commemoration of the repeal of on the 30th of March 1951 of the 1917 Shouter Prohibition Ordinance that prohibited the activities of the Shouter or spiritual Baptist faith. So we're sending our best wishes and happy Spiritual Baptist Liberation Day to the Spiritual Baptist community on behalf of all of us here on Talking Points and WESN Content Capital. Sean Michael Small, thank you very much for holding the fort this morning.
Yep.
And Karen Yesishar, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
So my question on Friday is simple. Why should I, as a young Trinidadian, stay here? Tell me, make an argument for me on Friday. But for now, folks, this has been Talking Points and Keaton Shaw. Remember, today is a good day to have a good day. Enjoy your day off tomorrow, and we'll see you again on Friday morning. Bye-bye.